Hey there, risers and thrivers. Welcome to another episode of On the Up and Up. I'm your host, Janine Heinrich, and I created this podcast to encourage critical conversations, amplify the untold stories and achievements of the underrepresented and underestimated, and inspire visionaries to take the next steps to pursue their dreams. On this episode, I'm joined by a force to be reckoned with who has a similar vision by the name of Darya Kamkalova, who is the founder of the Venturing Women podcast and the Venturing Women Lab, an incubator for women who aspire to venture into entrepreneurship. Outside of that, I recently learned she's also a fellow WHU Otto Beisheim School of Management alumna. She's a tech enthusiast, speaker, and most recently, angel investor. Darya, you are all of those things and so much more, and I'm really excited to have you join me for this conversation. Would you like to continue with your introduction?
Sure, happy to be here with you, Janine, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, I am the founder of Venturing Women Lab. This is an incubator for women who got stuck in their corporate careers and aspire to become tech entrepreneurs one day. As you've pointed out, I'm also hosting the Venturing Women podcast, where I interview female founders, investors, and startup ecosystem enablers. And my incubator actually stems as a project from the podcast. So when I launched the podcast, I knew it would become something bigger. I knew it would be the first step to something new. I just didn't know what exactly it would be. And I came to realize that I really want to support women on this journey to becoming tech entrepreneurs. And that's why I launched the Venturing Women Lab.
It's really interesting because you said that you launched the Venturing Women Lab for women who kind of got stuck. And I would love to explore that on a personal level with you, because I know previously you were working in the corporate world. We were quite happy there. You had all of your portfolio of projects going on. But how does that relate to your own journey and even starting the podcast?
It reflects my own journey pretty nicely. So I spent more than a decade working in the tech industry and specifically in the data industry. So my whole career in tech was all about data. I was in charge of data monetization, data acquisition, data products, strategic partnerships for data products. I built business operations of a global data marketplace, and I was in charge of Europe and Asia. So it was an exciting career, and I really enjoyed it. My job brought me to all continents except for the Antarctics, which is nice because it would have been just a little bit too cold over there. But other than that, I've been to the most exotic places. I had exciting projects, exciting assignments, and generally speaking, I was happy in my job until a certain point when I realized that, yes, I do feel stuck. I'm not progressing as fast as I would like to progress. I'm not growing. And I had countless conversations with women who feel the same. And it is a very difficult step to make, to decide to quit your job, to have enough trust in yourself to say, I'm going to explore, I'm going to venture into something new. So I am building an incubator for women who are basically like myself, just 2-3 years ago, who have this feeling of being stuck. And it is very much my journey too.
Definitely. I think it's also really interesting because you talked about feeling like you weren't moving as quickly as you would have liked to move. And what does that mean for you? Because does it mean that you were wanting to climb up the corporate ladder faster, take on different types of projects? What did that mean for you?
Excellent question, because it can mean so many different things for so many different people, right? So for me, it ultimately boils down to creative freedom, which is a little bit of an illusion in the corporate environment.
Unpack that. What you trying to say?
Well, so I just absolutely hate the necessity to run ideas by other people. And that's precisely what happens all the time when you are an employee. You have a brilliant idea. What do? You go to your manager You share the idea. You sell the idea to the manager. And if the manager buys in, then you have to...
Exactly.
Then you have to sell this idea to, I don't know how many layers of hierarchy. At some point, I was pitching some ideas to 4 layers of hierarchy, like 4 managers above me. Successfully pitched it. It got approved. But it is a very serious constraint for creative people, for intrapreneurs, and I'm a classical intrapreneur, so I crave change. I crave creation. I crave being able to let my creative juices flow and build new stuff. And I had this illusion that if I climb up that corporate ladder, it is not only associated with salary bumps, this cushy paycheck, which is always nice. Who would say no to a cushy paycheck? And to some nice job titles. Those inflate your ego, so super sexy too. But for me, the primary goal was to gain more of that creative freedom, to gain more power. It is highly unpopular to admit that you crave power. It sounds bad, particularly if you're a
people
woman.
think like you're an egomaniac. It's like, what
Correct.
do you mean you need power?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have to be cautious expressing this desire of craving power. But for me, power is just a tool. For me, power is something that allows you to create, to build something new. So I had this impression that if I climb higher the corporate ladder, that will come with more creative freedom, with more power to build.
And then you had a harsh reality that wasn't the case. What was that spark of reality for you that made you realize, actually, that might not be the case?
Many things many thoughts that I had are so far from reality, to be honest.
Fair.
So first of all, I also bought into this notion of if you work hard, if you work really, really, really hard, you get the rewards. This is not necessarily true in the corporate environment. There's so much politics, there's so much conflict of interests. And the fact that you're getting stellar reviews, stellar annual reviews, or quarterly reviews, the fact that you're hitting all the KPIs and OKRs, and God knows what kind of system you're using in your company, doesn't really matter. The fact that you perform or overperform doesn't guarantee anything at all. And isn't it frustrating?
That's such a hard pill to swallow. So the reason I'm a little bit quiet now is because this hits home a little bit too hard.
Sorry for that.
No.
Shall we quickly convert this episode into a therapy session?
We might need to. No, the thing is, because I'm having this reality, and I'm thinking to myself, now how do I phrase this without getting myself fired? What's going through my mind?
It's a fine line to walk.
It's a fine line, but what you're saying is very, very true, because I think part of that misconception is, especially from a young age, you're always taught, okay, you work really hard in school, you get your good grades, and you get this reward, and then you start to think, okay, you're going to go to the work environment, it's going to be the same way, and you can get all the accolades in the world, it's not. And this restriction on creative freedom is probably one of the most painful and demotivating experiences to go through when you have gone through like 8 different stakeholders, 5 different levels to go through to get this approval just for one person who maybe did a 20-minute Google research to come back and tell you why your idea is terrible. And you're like, really? Could you at least let me try it? So yeah, that's why with everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. It hits home a bit hard, most definitely. And for you, because I think I'm earlier in my journey on this than obviously you are. So now I'm even asking out of personal curiosity and learning, what was that catalyst for you to finally say, okay, I really need this creative freedom. Let me step out and do my own thing.
So on the one hand, there was a lot of change in the company happening. So the whole tech industry had been affected severely by the pandemic. And we've seen so many layoffs and so much turbulence in the tech industry. So in my company, there was also some change going on, and I was also reflecting on the fact that I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur ever since I was about 19 years old, more or less, because my father was what we would now call a serial entrepreneur. But he was a very different type of entrepreneur, because he was someone who would just see a market opportunity and seize it, regardless of the type of the opportunity. We need to also put it into the historical context. It was I come from Russia, so I was growing up in the 90s, and during that time, it was extremely, extremely chaotic. The country was a mess. The country was in disarray after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So, and after the introduction of capitalism in the country. So for my father, he was this type of person who would just easily identify gaps in the market and then try to fill these gaps. And it may sound harsh, but he didn't really care how to make money, as long as it was legal. But I'm not this type of entrepreneur. I need a vision. I need a mission. I cannot just say, okay, I'm going to sell, I don't know, tires or whatever, clothes. It's just I need to identify with what I'm doing. Okay. And so before I quit my job, I was reflecting on the fact that I knew I would be an entrepreneur since I was young, but I still believed that I had to learn so much about what it takes to run a business. Because it's tough. It's not easy to run a business. So I would always think, I still need to learn so much. I'm still not ready. I still have so much knowledge to acquire. I still have so much experience to collect. And at some point, I was looking around at what was going on in tech, and I was like, do you call this good leadership?
Yeah, because I was going to ask, retrospectively, do you still feel like that's the case, that you needed to learn everything before you could jump into it? Okay.
No, this is bullshit. Can I say
you can
things
curse.
like that?
It's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, fine.
We're good. Fair.
It's BS. It's like perfect bullshit. And that was also really, really hard and disheartening to realize that, I think you can be a good leader. I think you're fine with all the knowledge and experiences that you have already collected. And also my frustration was about the fact that I was never given an opportunity to become a team lead, a people manager. So I collected a lot of experiences where I would build teams internally, teams of volunteers or this type of matrix teams. But I never got the formal title people manager. Because a whole host of reasons. So I was hired in my last role. I was hired to build a team in Europe and then in Asia, and then the pandemic hit, and all these plans were shelved. I know I'm a good people manager, maybe not the best one, but when I build my team of volunteers from a podcast, now that I'm building my team for the lab, for the Venturing Women Lab, I'm enjoying being a manager. And that's what I was craving, and that's what I was never given this opportunity. And at some point I just said, you know what? I don't need a permission from my manager to become a team lead. I can do it myself.
And you don't need to be given the opportunity, because you can just create the opportunity for yourself.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I was doing all the time. But again, when you operate in the corporate environment, you still have to adhere to certain rules. You cannot create an opportunity for yourself to become a people manager, to get the formal job title and the formal authority. You can try to create this opportunity. That was I was doing, but at the end, you still need to go from someone else.
Which is and that's so frustrating when you realize your ability to do something is contingent upon a yes or a no from somebody else, which is why can't I do this? And there's something that makes you feel small, caged. I don't. Yeah, it's why am I? Why am I being restricted like this? And I think what's really interesting about what you say is, and what you've brought up is, it really reflected in a lot of the research that I did as well when I was doing research on the experiences of women entrepreneurs, specifically women of color entrepreneurs. And I did this with my thesis and with Founderland. And one of the things that all of them said was they felt stifled in their jobs. They were feeling like they were hitting a glass ceiling. They weren't being given opportunities. They weren't being allowed to grow, to the point where enough became enough at one point where they're just saying, you know what? At this point, I just have to take a bet on myself, because they're just so frustrated and so feeling like they're not reaching their full potential anymore that they do it. But like you said, many women also had said similar things of, oh, I feel like I have to learn everything first. I need to know this and I need to know that. And the question is, how do you even know when you've learned enough?
That is a fallacy. That is a fallacy. There is no such thing as learn enough. Learn enough for what? How do you measure?
Yeah, that's the question. But I think it's very easy when you're scared to do something. Because I know for me, right, I always think to myself, I want to run my podcast full time. And then I come to myself and I'm like, okay, there's always the same fears. And I think, one, okay, we're taking a leap of faith. Do I know enough to run this alone? Or two, financials. And then that becomes a very big concern as well. How am I going to live? And maybe that's a question I can throw back to you. What is your advice for people who do get concerned about, you're taking this bet on yourself, but now you also need to make sure that you survive somehow, some way?
Yeah. So it's a very sophisticated question, and there is no straightforward answer to that, I think. So on the one hand, yes, I do echo this idea that you're taking a bet on yourself, and you need to be able to trust yourself. You need to be able to trust yourself, and this trust usually comes from your track record. So I remember myself vividly at some point lying in the bathtub, staring at the ceiling, thinking, Darya, you learned how to make very good money as an employee. I was making pretty good money. I'm also very good at saving money. So I was diligently saving up my own fuck off fund.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes.
Fuck off fund.
Yeah,
I like that.
Fund, yeah. Or freedom fund, because I knew that at some point I will need the money as a runway for my business. So at some point I would be saving up to 50% of my annual income. And I was lying in this, bathtub, staring at the ceiling, thinking, you did learn how to make good money as an employee. You did learn how to save money. You did learn how to invest. So what makes you believe that you will not learn how to make money as an entrepreneur? It is a different journey. It requires a different skill set. It requires a whole new level of risk tolerance and initiative and proactivity. True, but I am all that. So you need to be able to realistically assess your personality type, your background, your resources, and then create a plan if you can. Or just trust the fact that the background and the resources and everything you have created and collected so far will set you up for success. I didn't have a plan A, let alone B. When I quit my job, I was just so exhausted that I wanted to have rest. So I was just tired. I was just really, really tired. And I do not recommend to anyone to go down this road. And I know that was suboptimal, perhaps, but I also knew that I needed time. I needed headspace. I needed complete freedom to explore, to experiment, to go out into the wild, just get off the leash and run and And that's why I did it. So you need to be able to realistically estimate your needs, your background, the risks. So it's all about, on the one hand, I'm saying that I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what exactly I'm going to be doing. So I didn't know what kind of business I would be building. But I did all this homework in terms of mitigating risks, planning my transition, making it as comfortable as possible. And it's also a lot about inner work.
And that's, first of all, I'm sorry that you did hit such a tough point in your career, because during that time that you were so exhausted and that you were so burnt out. And I'm really sorry that you did go through that experience. I'm super proud of you for doing what you needed to do to make sure that you feel better and that you were in the better mental space. And I think first of all, you're also speaking to my soul on this too. So I'm over here. I feel like I'm being preached like a sermon. It's like, keep it coming, because you're talking to my soul right now. But exactly what you just said was, the last time we spoke, this big aha moment for me, because I always knew the notion of, okay, I need to take a bet on myself. But for some reason, I didn't realize I was taking a bet on a company
yeah.
as well. And I think that that's oftentimes the case for a lot of people, right? Because it just feels like the natural thing that you do, but I never realized that I was taking a bet on my company. And so do you want to kind of expand on that a bit more? You already started jumping into it, but what does it mean that this taking a bet on yourself and taking a bet on your company, and what does that look like?
I think our life in general is a series of bets. Every time we make a decision, every time we make a choice, it's essentially a bet. Why a bet? Because we never have all the data. Sorry, I have been working in the data industry for too long. I used to collect data, right?
So all the analogies are going to be data related.
Yeah, but I mean, my friends would joke me, Darya, if you cannot make a decision, what do you need to do? Collect more data.
I mean, it sounds like a good option to me.
Yeah, it is. It helps.
Yeah.
But what I mean is that every time we make a decision, we don't have 100% of the information. And also, life and world is the volatile things, things change all the time. So when we're employed, we believe that we have a contract with our employer, with our company. And we believe we often have this feeling this is something cut in stone, because, we have a contract. And that creates a strong sense of security and safety. So we shift our responsibility for our safety and security, for that paycheck that comes every month from ourselves to the employer. And why we make a bet is that we believe that, okay, as long as we have this contract, we have certain rules of the game, and these rules create this space of safety and security. Mm-hmm. And we relax a little bit. We know that we're safe. We know that we're protected. We think that we're protected.
You think we are.
We think we are. But the reality is that only holds true as long as things go well. As long as the market conditions are favorable to this company. As soon as things go south, you're just a number. You're just a number in an Excel sheet. And all this talk that is so cheap, talk about, we're family. I absolutely hate it. Jesus
I can't stand
Christ.
that. I can't stand that.
Yeah, you're not my family.
Like, exactly. I'm like, you are my work colleague, and let's keep it the way.
Yes.
There's a distance and there's a line.
Yes.
But yeah.
So as soon as things go south, yes, for a while, our employer will be protecting us because the company will be navigating the storm. But once the company hits this point where they cannot navigate the storm anymore, they will get rid of you.
Yeah, because it's the bottom line, right?
Right.
It's about financials, and each person on there is a cost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
mm-hmm.
just to wrap it up, so there is this, I believe it is a fallacy, a huge fallacy that is very prominent in the society, that employment is safe versus entrepreneurship is highly risky. And I don't want to say that entrepreneurship is not risky. It bloody is. It's not for everyone. You're by your own. You're in charge. But employment just creates this extra layer of security between you and the market. but you are still on the market. You're still on the market. It's just for a while, the employer is acting like a shield for you to be able to weather a storm. But that shield is just temporary. And what is also interesting, if you're as an entrepreneur, you have the power to be able to generate revenue in different ways and have multiple income streams. As an employee, you essentially have just one income stream. Most people only have one paycheck. Most people only have one source of income. And if you think about this in terms of investment terms, right? So one of the golden rules of investment is don't put all the eggs into one basket.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what you're doing. Yeah, diversify the risk. And that's precisely what we're doing as employees. We put all bets, we put all eggs into one basket because we only have one paycheck. And once this paycheck is gone, okay, if you live in a country like Germany or France or Spain, the social security system will protect you for a while, but only for a while. And I have friends who have been highly qualified friends, brilliant professionals, who had been laid off, and they spend a year looking for a job. A year, or even longer.
That's tough. And that's tough, especially psychologically. After a while,
Absolutely.
It takes a toll. Hey there, it's me again. So, there's something that I really, really, really love. You know what that is? When there's a thread that goes through various episodes with different speakers. On last week's episode, Sufyan Osama noted that he used to reflect on his proof points to help him feel confident in pursuing entrepreneurship. Last season, Archita Fritz spoke about taking a bet on herself and even created the Empowered Transition Guide to help others feel empowered to leave the workforce and pursue their own endeavors, whether it was solo entrepreneurship or a larger venture case. So if this episode is speaking to you, I not only ask that you like, follow, and or share a review, but also check out those episodes next. Now, without further ado, back to the episode. Which do you think is from your experience with working with women entrepreneurs or women who are interested in leaving their corporate jobs to pursue entrepreneurship, which have you found to be the more prevalent challenge? Is it the limiting beliefs or is it needing to learn the business acumen?
Second. No, I mean the limiting beliefs, yeah. Because of all the social programming around women. So women are not conditioned to be the explorers, the venturers, the features and the traits that are inherent for entrepreneurs are not being instilled into women and girls. We're taught to play safe. We're taught to be nice. We're taught to be likable. I had a totally schizophrenic upbringing. So as I've said, my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom, she used to be a housewife for like 13 years. And then when she went back to work, because my parents divorced, she had to make a living. So she quickly climbed the corporate ladder, and she became the general manager of a company. And she's a very strong woman. She's very, very capable. And and she would, on the one hand, she would raise me as someone extremely independent. She would be telling me all the time, look, we don't have any resources. I grew up in poverty. We didn't have any resources. So she would tell me, anything you want to get in life, you'll have to get it yourself.
That's funny because my mom was the same, and she literally raised me the same. If we were broke, and she let me know. Yeah. She was like, I know you want that toy and you're crying in the store, but I don't know what to tell you. We don't have the money. So if you really want the toy, find a way to get it. Otherwise,
I began working when I was 13.
Yeah.
13.
Babysitting.
No, yeah. Well, in my case, in your case, it was babysitting.
Mine was babysitting. Yeah,
mine was babysitting. I was using my English language skills to earn an extra buck. But so on the one hand, she would raise me as someone extremely independent, tenacious, persistent, and abrasive. I am abrasive just as much as she is. But on the other hand, I would still hear all these comments. Oh, but you're a girl. You have to be nice. I'm like, Mom, make up your mind.
Right? Thank you. Can somebody explain that to me? Because I'm like, didn't you teach me to be like this? And now you're telling me to tone it down. No, I'm not toning it down.
I'm not toning it down. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're a girl. You have to be smarter. He's a boy. And I'm like
it's like just be quiet. Don't have to be. No.
And I had a ridiculous I would say reflection of this whole contradicting kind of signals also at work. So I would be in charge of negotiating contracts for my company globally, literally. So the company would send me to places like Algeria or Brazil or Australia to negotiate contracts in the automotive industry. You can imagine just the level of complexity is super high. And then at some point, I was reporting directly to the managing director of this company. At some point, he told me in the eye, he was looking me in the eye and saying, Darya, you are the most horrible person in this company when it comes to salary negotiations. And I'm like, I take it as a compliment. What do you want?
The person you send out to exactly the person you send out to negotiate globally shall not negotiate on her own behalf. What?
Yes. It doesn't make any sense.
Crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all. But what's interesting about what you said is this also came up in my research, because I did one part of the research just on the experiences of women of color entrepreneurs. And then personally, I wrote another academic paper specifically on identity. And it was interesting because when I looked into the experiences of women entrepreneurs, the ones who identified with more male-like characteristics, and this was oftentimes apparent male-like, right? The typical archetypical behaviors that one would associate with an entrepreneur. So when you say entrepreneur, people think Elon Musk or whatever. The ones who had characteristics that fell a little bit more into line with those, when you looked at their experiences, oftentimes they had also worked in environments or grown up in environments where they had experienced someone who was an entrepreneur around them and they had seen it firsthand. They also oftentimes worked in investment banking or consulting in environments where it was maybe a bit more male dominated, but they also had to operate a bit more like that. And it was interesting to see how these characteristics influenced their understanding of their experiences within the entrepreneurship sphere and how they also operated within it. So being a bit more brazen about this is what I expect and this is how I'm going to go for it, and kind of adopting those behaviors. And so they tended to assimilate a little bit easier into the entrepreneurship ecosystem as it currently stands, and oftentimes didn't even push back too much. There were two spectrums on that side. The ones who fit into this category, half of them just didn't even want to push back too much on the status quo of the ecosystem, while others were like, I can assimilate into it, but there's certain things that are wrong, which unfair treatment as a woman. But it was very interesting to see how their identities and their experiences in certain environments with these characteristics that they had learned either helped to navigate that environment a lot easier, versus others who grew up in more environments or worked in environments where women tended to have more of the characteristics society would expect a woman to have. Their experiences in the startup ecosystem was very, very different. And that was a really interesting highlight that I got out of the research.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it applies in my case, because I think the fact that my dad was an entrepreneur didn't make a lot of impact on me. No, not really. And also, quite on the contrary, excuse me. It created a lot of anxiety in me. So, which also took me a lot of time and again a lot of therapy and inner work to unpack it, because I had this kind of mixed feelings about entrepreneurship because of the nature of the 90s in Russia and how chaotic it was, and because of the fact that my dad he was an alcoholic. Okay. And a violent one. So I grew up in a household with domestic violence and alcoholism. And so he was brilliant in terms of identifying market opportunities and seizing those market opportunities and earning money. But he was really, really bad at making choices on people that surrounded him. And he was not able to retain the money. So he would just earn and quickly lose, earn, quickly lose. So in my mind, that created this massive volatility. So I would say entrepreneurship is something, well, it is by default risky. But in my mind, it was...
You're seeing it as this volatile.
Volatile as hell. So it took me a lot of time just to realize that this is not a typical entrepreneurial journey. There are some circumstances that massively impacted him and myself. So I would say my abrasiveness comes more from the fact that my mom raised me this way, and she's this type of person. So she's very persistent. And she's very entrepreneurial, although she never had her own business, and I was trying to talk her into that. I was like, Mom, let's do it. I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna give you the money. I'm gonna help you. Just, why do you need an employer? You don't need an employer. You're gonna be so much better by yourself. Also because I see entrepreneurship as an opportunity to create the work environments that you want.
Okay.
And that's, I think, also a massive problem. So for so many women that not only feel stuck, not only feel that they hit a glass ceiling at work, they also do not enjoy the environment. It's toxic. Nope. It's the opposite of supportive.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to create the environment that you want.
As an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to craft it, for sure. And it's really interesting what you say, because some research showed that in the US, post-COVID, COVID obviously sent a lot of people to working remotely. And it was shown for a lot of African Americans, a lot of them are working remotely still now. And some of the research was like, okay, what's going on there? Or a lot of them are now self-employed or are taking some sort of entrepreneurial path. And then I think the research went into it a little bit, was kind of like, what's going on? Why are people acting like this? And I realized like the environment at a lot of in corporate America, a lot of African Americans was just like, or Black people living in America were feeling like, you know what, this environment, it's not really for me. I don't really like it. So if I can work from home, great, because I don't have to deal with it. And even then, a lot of people just took that bet on themselves. And they were saying, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing, because they have started off stuff with a side hustle next to their full-time job. And then inevitably COVID and everything actually pushed them more into this. And I think what you're saying about the power to create your own environment is one not to be understated, because it has so much to do with mental health. It has so much to do with the self-work that you also mentioned previously, which also relates to that, because it takes a toll on you if you're in an environment that you don't feel happy in, or that's a toxic one at that.
Very much so. You made an allusion early in this conversation, and I recently came up with this metaphor. Imagine you're walking in the street and you see a nice fancy dress in a shop window, and you walk into the shop and you put on this dress, you try it, and it's perfect in your thighs, but it's maybe a little bit too tight in your breast, or the other way around. It's perfect on the top, but it's just a little bit too tight on your butt. And that's precisely what a corporate environment can become at some point. It's a very fancy dress, but it's just too tight. And at some point, it may become a straitjacket.
And I know we're getting towards the end of the conversation, and so what I wanted to kind of go forward with, you've spoken to a lot of women entrepreneurs, you've spoken to a lot of women who want to transition out, and we talked about a lot of advice. So for people who are interested in joining the Venturing Women Lab and Incubator, what advice do you have for them in getting in touch, and also what key learnings can they get out of it?
So the key learning is that transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur, and particularly to a tech entrepreneur, has a lot to do with your own trust in yourself, It has a lot to do with the environment that you need to be able to make the leap. And it has to do a lot with clarity. So most of the why I'm building the lab is because I had so many conversations with women who would tell me, look, I have this idea. I have no idea, and I don't know where to start. I don't know. And
you feel like perplexed, yeah.
Yeah, because it is daunting. It is such a complex endeavor. And one may say, yeah, but just go Google it. It's not that easy.
No, it's not. Because you have a whole lot of information, but what information do you take away, right? It's kind of what, yeah. There's a lot of entrepreneurial jargon.
Yeah.
But in all of that, what do you need to know?
Yeah.
So it's not as easy as just Google.
And the saddest thing, I believe, is the fact that so many women think they're not a typical, entrepreneur avatar. I had a conversation with one of the women who booked a spot on my program. So it's something like reverse customer development, just to understand like what appealed to them. And she began that conversation with the following phrase: you know what? I'm not a typical entrepreneur. She worked in a large corporation, and she said, I'm 39, I have 2 kids, I live in a small town and not in a fancy startup hub like Berlin or London. I'm not a typical entrepreneur. And I felt so sad about it because statistically speaking, who is a typical entrepreneur? Who is a successful entrepreneur? So we have these images instilled in our minds. It's like ingrained there. And we bought into those images, we bought into those ideas. And for so many people, what is really lacking is this belief, this trust in themselves, clarity about the next steps, the right environment, shattering the limiting beliefs and doing the inner work and scaling your thinking. Because it is a massive mindset shift that you go through when you quit your job and you transition from employee to entrepreneur. It is massive. For me, it was, I'm a completely different person now. The way you think, the way you act, the way you behave, like it's all different. The way you see the world is different. And that's why I'm building this kind of dual system. I call it something like a ski track. So I have 2 tracks, the business track and the personal development track. So the business track supports women in making this business. Some business plan is a very a fixed term, but it walks you through the business side of setting up your venture, and the personal development track walks you through this personal transition. Because nobody talks about the fact that you don't only need the business plan for your company, you need a plan for yourself.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And that's the most pivotal part of it, to be honest, because the business plan, it can change, it'll adapt, it'll pivot according to the feedback that you're getting, but the plan for yourself is one of the key things that you need. And maybe one very, very last question from my side. When you were going through scaling your mindset, what was one thing that you did? I mean, you said you kind of created a plan, but what helped you? Was there a book? Was there a podcast? Was there a piece of advice that helps you to kind of shift your mindset or at least get that shift started?
Mm-hmm. I think it was the most pivotal moment, like the pivotal moment for me was to get a piece of advice and understand that scale is directly associated with or directly related to risk and responsibility that you're willing to take. And so many people, when they decide to become self-employed, they get stuck in this very, very small scale type of business. So they earn a little bit of money, but they never grow. And for me, scale is directly related to impact. It goes back to this power conversation, right? So for me, it's not just about being able to make the money I want to make, but it's also being able to make the impact I want to make.
I can relate to that, yeah.
And that comes with the amount of risk that you're willing to tolerate. And risk is nothing else but the responsibility that you can bear. In my case, it was the decision to say, I'm going to hire a team. And that essentially means that you're paying someone's salary out of your savings.
Ooh. Okay, that's how you were doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a big responsibility to bear.
Yeah. Before you start generating revenue, it is an investment. And I knew that before. It is impossible to build a business without making at least some investment. And it can be, at first, it can be your time, your skills, your knowledge, but in most cases, it's also money. So when I was weighing, this decision, do I want to try to pull it off? And what is the result that I can possibly achieve if I'm doing it alone? Is it even close to the result that I want to achieve? And if it's not, it means that, okay, I need a team. And if I need a team, it means this kind of...
Yeah. Understood.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I think that's a really great way to put it. I think those were... it's a fantastic way to close it because it kind of all sums it up, everything that we talked to, because we touched on the fact money, we talked about the power aspect, we talked about the need for creative freedom. So there's so much that we spoke about, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me and have this conversation. And I wanted to ask, if listeners wanted to get in touch or find out more about you, where could they learn more about Venturing Women and yourself?
They can learn about Venturing Women on our webpage. So it's venturingwomen.org. And they can follow myself on LinkedIn. They can follow Venturing Women Lab on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And we also have a WhatsApp chat. It is a community of more than 300 people now, female founders, aspiring founders, female investors, aspiring investors. And it's a very lively community. So if you're someone who's toying with an idea of launching your business and you do not know many entrepreneurs, you do not know many female entrepreneurs, it is the right space to surround yourself with this type of people and with this type of thinking, because, as I said, it's a lot about scaling your thinking.
Thank you, Darya, for taking the time to join me, sharing your story and your outstanding work. And to all of you listening, especially those who identify as women and are feeling hesitant to take the next steps, please reach out to her and her outstanding team at the Venturing Women Lab. All details linked in the show notes. If you have feedback to share, feel free to leave it as a review, comment, or email me directly at janine@ontheupandup.io. Also, I'd love to interact more with all of you via our social channels, so follow us on either Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And with that being said, the next episode will go live in 2 weeks, and I cannot wait to share it with all of you. So until then, onwards and upwards, y'all, and I'll speak to you then.